Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other.
In a message out of Syria, the country's state media on Tuesday night reported that Israel carried out airstrikes in the nation's south, close to the Israeli border. News agency Sana added that Israeli aggression struck the Al-Hara hill. Take a listen to the report on Syrian state television.
Our correspondent in Dara reports an Israeli aggression on Tel Hara in the Dara province.
Well, Al-Hara Hill is home to Syrian army posts and only caused material damage and did not inflict any casualties. That's according to Sana regarding the attack. The last reported strikes took place earlier this month when multiple Iranian-linked targets were hit near Homs and Damascus, reportedly killing 15 people, including 6 civilians. Israel did not comment on this attack, but it had previously acknowledged carrying out strikes in Syria.
Iran's actions have the Pentagon preparing for the worst. David Martin is the only network correspondent traveling with the top U.S. general in the Middle East and got exclusive video of American military forces in the region.
Patriot air defense missile batteries in the middle of the Saudi Arabian desert, manned by American soldiers from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. General Frank McKenzie, the top U.S. military commander for the Middle East, is here because they could be the vanguard of a major new buildup for war with Iran. We look like we're in the middle of nowhere. What are they defending out here?
Well, as you know, they have. We're in the vicinity of Prince Sultan Air Base, or PSAB as it's known.
Prince Sultan Air Base has a 10,000-foot runway and ramp space for hundreds of aircraft. To begin with, the U.S. will bring in a squadron of top-of-the-line F-22 stealth fighters, but this base is capable of handling much, much more. How many planes could you bring in here?
There have been a lot of planes here in the past. I won't get into exact details, but you could bring as many as you want.
This is what the base looked like in 1990, on the eve of the first Gulf War, filled with American warplanes wingtip to wingtip. That war was against Iraq. Now, nearly 30 years later, the U.S. and its allies are locked in a cycle of rising tensions with Iran. So when you look at the capabilities here, it looks like this is the beginning of preparations for if these tensions turn into a war.
Well, I'd prefer to say it's like this. It's a signal that we're not going to be cowed by Iranian malign activities.
To keep the base supplied, the U.S. plans to use a Saudi port on the Red Sea, which will allow it to bring in ammunition and spare parts without having to pass through the Strait of Hormuz and under the eyes of the Iranian Navy to reach Persian Gulf ports. This base is unmistakable evidence the U.S. is preparing for the possibility that tensions with Iran turn into a war. David Martin, CBS News, Prince Sultan Air Base, Saudi Arabia.
The U.S. deploying more military to Saudi Arabia in a show of force amid escalating tensions in the Middle East. Iran seizing a British oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz just one day after the U.S. took down an Iranian drone. The president warning Iran against any more provocative action, alluding to the sanctions already crippling the country.
Iran is in big trouble right now. Their economy is crashing. It's coming to a crash. They're trying to bring soldiers back home because they can't pay them. A lot of bad things are happening to them, and it's very easy to straighten out, or it's very easy for us to make it a lot worse.
Lucas Tomlinson is live from the Pentagon with the very latest on this developing story. Hi, Lucas.
Hi, Laura. It's the first time in 16 years the U.S. military has deployed forces to Saudi Arabia as tensions with Iran continue to escalate. The Pentagon made the announcement last night in a statement, quote, This movement of forces provides an additional deterrent and ensures our ability to defend our forces and interests in the region from emergent, credible threats. U.S. Central Command continually assesses force posture in the region and is working with Kingdom of Saudi Arabia authorities to base U.S. assets at the appropriate locations. The statement did not mention Iran by name. Earlier today, Iranian state TV aired this video showing Islamic Revolutionary Guard forces wearing black ski masks fast roping down a helicopter on the deck of the British oil tanker seized Friday night in the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian forces briefly detained another British tanker, but let the vessel proceed to the Persian Gulf. Last week, a Royal Navy warship blocked 3 Iranian gunboats from seizing another British tanker. Iran says its actions are retaliation for British commandos seizing their supertanker off Gibraltar 2 weeks ago. Authorities said it was carrying oil to Syria in violation of EU sanctions. There are currently 70,000 U.S. troops deployed to the Middle East. The hundreds going to Saudi Arabia are part of the reinforcements the Pentagon ordered to the region in May and will include a Patriot missile battery and more fighter jets. One day before Iran seized the British tanker, the USS Boxer, seen here, transited the Strait of Hormuz in a show of force and destroyed an Iranian drone using this new Marine Corps anti-drone jamming device strapped to the deck without firing a shot, a new addition to the U.S. arsenal. Iran denies the American warship downed its drone.
Based on the latest information I received from Tehran, we have so far absolutely no information about losing a drone.
It went down. And the fact that Foreign Minister Zarif either didn't know or lied about it, I can't account for. It happened.
This latest provocation from Iran comes nearly a month to the day when Iranian forces shot down a U.S. drone over the Strait of Hormuz. Laura?
All right, Lucas Tomlinson for us at the Pentagon. Thank you so much.
Pakistan's prime minister is seeking to restore U.S. aid to his country, which Trump ended last year, saying that Islamabad was not doing enough to fight extremism.
The problem was Pakistan, this is before you, Pakistan was not doing anything for us. They were really, I think, subversive. They were going against us. I tell you what, to be honest, I think we have a better relationship with Pakistan right now than we did when we were paying that money.
Trump blamed the previous U.S. administration for a lack of Pakistan's cooperation.
I think Pakistan can do a tremendous amount against, with respect to Afghanistan. They didn't do it, and I don't blame them because they were dealing with the wrong president. Who knows? But I think Pakistan could have done. They're helping us a lot now. I think they could have helped us a lot in the past.
Trump said the U.S. aid, amounting to about $1.3 billion, could be restored to Pakistan, depending on what's worked out. He wants Pakistan's cooperation on reaching a deal with the Taliban to end the war in Afghanistan and withdraw U.S. troops from there after close to 19 years.
I think Pakistan's going to help us out to extricate ourselves. We're like policemen. We're not fighting a war. If we wanted to fight a war in Afghanistan and win it, I could win that war in a week. I just don't want to kill 10 million people.
Khan said there is no military solution in Afghanistan.
I feel, and I think we will discuss this, it's the closest we have been to a peace deal. And we hope that in the coming days, we will be able to urge the Taliban to speak to the Afghan government and come to a settlement, a political solution.
So far, Taliban leaders have refused to negotiate directly with the government in Kabul, calling it illegitimate and a puppet of the United States. The group has met with U.S. representatives for 7 rounds of peace talks. Negotiators have claimed progress in the latest round of talks that began June 29th in Doha, Qatar, but at the same time, a Taliban attack in Afghanistan killed 25 people.
A new interim report released at the request of the British Foreign Secretary says Christian persecution in some parts of the world is, quote, close to meeting the international definition of genocide, with Christians being targeted by extremist groups in the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, and East Asia. For more on this, we bring in the president of the Iraqi Christian Relief Council and senior fellow of the Philos Project, Juliana Taimoorazi. Juliana, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me on, Molly.
It's really startling to see that sort of figure, that takeaway from the report, that it could potentially be reaching genocidal levels. Also worth noting from this report, 80% of religious believers who are being persecuted around the world are Christians. Should this be a wake-up, a worldwide wake-up?
Absolutely. There has been a genocide that is already underway and perpetrated by ISIS. As you know, Secretary Kerry announced this as a genocide of the Christians of Iraq and also the Yazidis. But this has been going on for so long. For example, in terms of Iraq, the Assyrians, also the Chaldeans and the Syriacs of Iraq have come under persecution starting 2003 until today. Our numbers were 1.5 million today, down to 200,000 people. And look at Sri Lanka. Look at what happened there. Look at what's happening in India. Nobody's really talking about India. So we're grateful for Secretary Hunt and also Ambassador at Large Brownback for really stepping up to do something in a positive way, in a more meaningful way. But there's so much that needs to get done still worldwide. According to Open Doors report, 1 out of 9 Christians, Molly, across the world are being persecuted today.
And of course, this causes not just potentially death, as we're talking about genocide, but also people being pushed out of their homelands and the religion where it perhaps had a stronghold being forced out of areas where Christians lived. I want to take a listen. This is the British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt speaking in Kenya.
Around 250 million Christians being persecuted, 3,000 losing their lives last year alone, and that's increasing. And there are many different reasons for that. Religious conservatism, politicians playing on people's religious prejudices, state-sponsored oppression, terrorism.
He also talked about political correctness. Do you think that plays a role?
Absolutely. Actually, I believe the death of most of the people that are suffering today is truly because of the political correctness, because the world turns a blind eye to this. And when we are politically correct, we are sympathizing with those terrorists that are destroying communities and erasing histories. For example, the Assyrian people in Iraq, our history, they're trying to erase our history by destroying our monuments and really pushing out us from the homeland. But you know what, Molly? Persecution looks different in different parts of the world. For example, let's take Iran. According to the International Christian Concern, they did a report. In 2017, there were 16 former Muslims that were persecuted. But in 2018, 171 former Muslims, and also 3 Assyrians that are being persecuted today, Pastor Victor and his family, for example. In Egypt, they are giving the Christians a hard time to legalize churches. Mm-hmm. We saw what ISIS did in Sri Lanka. So the way we answer every persecuted situation, it has to be different. Right. For example, Boko Haram in Nigeria. We have to deal with them differently.
And perhaps these horrific attacks in Sri Lanka also will be seen as a wake-up call. Juliana Taimoorazy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you.